What's going on, True Soldiers? It's Lou Bradford here, aka King Truth, and True Soldiers EDU. Today I'd like to speak on the subject of faith, pressure, and acceptance. I start off by saying, how are you doing? Or asking, how are you doing? Is how are you doing a greeting? Or is how you doing a question? If you think about it, when people say, how are you doing? You'll see them walking, how are you doing? And steady going. If they were asking the question sincerely, you would tell them how you're doing. But you got people that come off in a camouflage manner sometimes, and they'll say, yes, I'm blessed. It's a nice day. But inside, they may be pressured to the max, beyond measure. So if you tell them how you're doing, literally, they try to get out of that. I didn't mean it by how are you doing, the majority of people. It was just a greeting. Pressure. Pressure comes from not speaking, not letting out, and bottling up and holding emotions and feelings in. So essentially, pressure is what faith isn't. What is faith? Faith is the act of letting go. Let me explain. The root meaning, or matter of fact, the root word, which derives from Latin, fid, F-I-D, is where faith comes from. To exemplify fidelity, let's see. What does fidelity mean?
Fidelity means faithfulness to a person, cause, or belief, demonstrated by continuing loyalty and support.
You'll see fid, F-I-D, and fidelity, which is faith to a belief or someone or an idea. So fid, to divide, to depart, or like I said, to let go, to breathe out. Matter of fact, the British meaning for nirvana is to let out, to breathe. I like to call myself, or I self-appointed myself as a philosopher. Although I study at home and then work Eastern psychology, and at school I study Western psychology at a religious-based college, university. You may ask, who do I think I am, or who do I call myself being a philosopher? The root meaning of philosopher is just a lover of wisdom. Wisdom is to listen. Smart may be what you're saying, but to be wise is to listen. You don't get wisdom from the classroom. You'll get wisdom through life and listening to the flows of life. Whether it be listening by visually reading or listening by listening to your peers or mentors or those that you teach, feedback and advice through life. When you listen and read, you go into what animals can't do, but what humans are blessed with, and that's simile in the future, opposed to trial and error. By living life through trial and error, trial, you're exerting energy and time. Error, you have to face that through error could be death of yourself, or death of this, or death of that. That's why I'm a lover of wisdom, because I want to intake stories and advice through the way people have already lived and simulate what I can take from that to utilize in the future based on the past that people have already experienced and the results that came from that. It'll give you a hypothesis on what happens, which will make you a scientist or a philosopher. Back to the point at hand, pressure is to hold on, to be bottled up. Faith is to let go, to breathe out, to apart, divide. If you think about how God is looked at, the faith that people have that in God, the imagination that they utilize, like, for example, stars, beyond the stars, and sitting on a throne, is how they image God. Which they get from what they see in life and the Word of God projected through the Bible. You, like, for instance, Jesus says, you read the Bible daily and therefore you think you have life. But you have to listen to the Spirit that flows through your soul. And have faith that the Spirit that you're living in that goes through you is reliable. You can use the Bible as a guideline and the stories told to simulate the future, but the letter kills, and faith is life. So basically, what's road can bring you to death, and what faith is to listen to the flows of life and have faith in that. The knowing that you don't know is the highest form of faith. To cling to an idea or concept that you imagine what is nothing more mere than an idol. For instance, what we view, what has been sculpted through metal and wood and pictures, what we view Jesus as or God as, is an idol. It's not necessarily taken seriously when you view God as what they have projected. So it's not dangerous. What's dangerous is the imagination, to imagine the image of what God is in a concept or an idea, because a concept or an idea is abstract. It doesn't have a concrete meaning. It doesn't have a concrete existence. So that's where the danger lies, not in what you construct through metal and wood and paintings. That's not taken seriously, necessarily. So if you have a concept or idea that you know and grasp onto, that you have constructed, that's idolization, which is a sin. Let me go in on sin. Sin derives from the Greek meaning to miss the point, or like an archer, to miss the mark. You may have been projected God as sitting on the throne and being the king or the ruler of the earth, which comes from man's image, imagination of a king on his throne, which you see here. You have the king sitting on his throne with his back to the wall and his courtiers around him. The king's back is to the wall because he rules with force. And you kneel like you see here, you kneel beneath the king, because when you present yourself to the king by kneeling, it gives appetite to him feeling safety, because he rules with force. And kneeling, you cannot attack the king from the position of kneeling. So if we imagine God as the king that sits on the throne, which is an abstract, constructed, image, that's an idolization, which is a sin. If you look at a pulpit and how the modern church is set up, you have the reverend, pastor, priest, or whatever you may call it, standing at the throne with his courtiers around and behind him, just as it comes from kings on their throne with their courtiers around them. You know, as you view here, same idea. So to imagine through your imagination a nation of images, a collage of images that you've constructed from the past building up to where you are now, the present, is not faith. You have to have faith. Well, let me back up a little bit. A good scientist, I believe, is to have more faith than an overly religious person. Because a good scientist is open to an idea of what God may be and can be. He doesn't grasp on to the idea of what God is. He's willing to accept what God is by listening, wisdom. But then again, the scientist runs into a problem. He has to have faith in his instruments that he uses, the way he perceives what he views in his instruments, and behind your eyes, which he perceived, faith in his brain, that it's constructing the correct ideas of what God is through his observance. So faith, to give an analogy and a metaphor on faith, when you're in water, you don't grasp on and hold on to the water. The quicker you do that, the quicker it flees from your hands and you sink down. You don't get stiff and grasp onto it. You have to flow, go with the flow, to have faith that you are going to stay afloat and stay alive. One more example is if a cat falls out of a tree, he doesn't stiffen up and try try to grasp on for safety, he relaxes, falls, lets his tail hit the ground and falls safely from not grasping on and tensing up and feeling the pressure and having faith that he will fall correctly and land correctly. So the highest form of faith is knowing that you do not know. My sister recently put a message on her wall on social media saying, sometimes you have to know that you can't know it all. And that's when you accept. You bring acceptance into your life, knowing that you cannot know it all. So that's my philosophy on faith, pressure, and acceptance. Appreciate it, true soldiers. Hope you're having a great day you can take from this message, and continue to have a great month, year, and lifetime.